that's my Cisco dCloud dashboard, and I already have my lab, the Cisco UCS structure 5.4 installation and configuration lab available. So it's going to jump right at it. So first things first, it tells me that I'm left with about 3.5 hours to complete this lab. The basic topology that I have consists of a workstation apparently to remote desktop into the terminals. We've got a Windows 80 machine running, most likely running System Center, Virtual Machine Manager for automation and orchestration. We also got a mail machine, a Windows machine, a virtual cluster based on Linux, VSM, Cisco UCSM machine, UCSM Director 5.4, and we also have ESX clusters running, and apparently they're all tied up to a primary VLAN emerging from different isolated LANs. So the details tells pretty much the lab schedule, and in terms of servers, we pretty much got everything that we need to know in the servers. We can remotely reboot or shut down the servers, but it's not recommended by Cisco on the dClouds. And in terms of resources, we have the lab guide that will lead us through the complete walkthrough on this particular lab scenario. So the time this boots up, loads up, we can have two options going about these devices. We can have Cisco AnyConnect credentials. So if you're using Cisco AnyConnect VPN mobility client, you can directly connect to all of these devices. It says up to 16 devices, and it gives you the session IDs. The other way, the possible way, is to connect to these devices using the remote desktop on this workstation, and we will be using this remote desktop. And so that's the UCS structure installation and configuration lab guide, last updated on 25th March 2016, and it pretty much goes through the basics, deployment and setup of UCS Director, all the way to applying the patches to UCS Director. And we've got 8 scenarios to cover, and the same topology that we have already seen. And let's start with scenario number 1, deployment and setup of UCS Director. For that particular scenario, let's remote desktop to the workstation. Sometimes it takes a while because it's a GUI based interface, and also the remote desktop and this GUI based machines takes a little while, so keep an eye on your address bar. If it's loading, you have to wait. Sometimes it takes quite a while, sometimes even up to a minute. So by the time it loads up, let's have a quick look on scenario number 1, what it tells us to do. So from demonstration workstation, we have to open vSphere client, and we have to log into that client, and top menu we got to deploy the AVF template. So we logged into the workstation, and just to go through it, we've got already got a Cisco UCS Director PowerShell console here, UCS Manager, a putty to further into all of them, VMware vSphere client in the NetApp system manager, I don't really think that we'll be using that app for this particular lab scenario. So that's that. As for the guide for the demonstration workstation, open VMware vSphere client, and let's quickly jump into that. And it tells us to use the Windows credentials. Apparently it's going to log us in, no problems. Okay, by the time it boots up, let's look into what we've got to do here. So we've got to jump to FTP root folder, and then we have to deploy this OVF template. So we are here. So the guide tells us to go through the file and then deploy this Cisco UCS structure template, OVF template. So let's jump into VMware vSphere client, file, deploy OVF template, and it's on the FTP root folder. There we have it. Click open, and then it tells us to not to change the settings, just press next and press next. We gotta set the end user license, so let's do that. And go ahead and click no changes needed. So we're going to leave everything just like that. And in terms of storage, we have to select demo data storage. So demo data storage is already selected, so let's jump next. And next through this format, and in terms of network mapping, we'll be selecting N1 KV management VLAN. So nothing over here, let's move on. Network mapping, and we've got a network 1 here as the source network. But we do not have a destination network, so that's quite interesting to see that at the moment we do not have the destination network here. Hang on, apparently it's in the drop down list. Yep, N1 KV management VLANs, that's what we're using for the destination networks. And click next. And in terms of the property windows, the next windows, we will have to provide that password. Change the default passwords to Cisco 12345, and that's Cisco 12345. And I'm also going to change the shell admin password to the same. Cisco 12345. And in terms of the management IP address, we've got 198.168.133. So that was 198.133, and I believe there was 110. Brilliant. 255 at 255. 192.0. So that's that, and the gateway is 198 18.128.1. So click next, and it tells us it's ready to complete, and once we're done, click finish, and it's going to deploy the OVF template, and it's going to deploy the system.vmdk, which is a virtual machine, to the vCenter. And by the time it just gets done, let's quickly jump to the next part. When the process is completed, we will see Cisco UCS the 5.4 in-hosting clusters in the vSphere in powered on state. So we got to have a look on that. It says 11 minutes remaining, so I'm going to pause the recording. Almost there, just about 8 seconds left, and hopefully once that's done, we'll have our virtual machine of Cisco UCS Director up and running here. So that's done. If we click the virtual machine here, we should see it up and running, and so far so good. Brilliant. For the next part, we have to bring in the initial system configuration panel, and we will be using the web console to log in. For that, we have to open up the Chrome browser, and we have to click the UCSD login. So let's do that. So now we're using the Chrome browser in the workstation, and we're trying to log in to use Cisco UCS Director. And let's see if it gets through. That's the initial interface you get once you first install the Cisco UCS Director, and you're presented with this sort of visit where you can go through creation of this guided setup, configure FlexPaths, VDCs, devices, scripting, and all sorts of things. So the guides wants us to go through the guided section, and then to configure mail, DNS, NTPs, and all the bare minimum requirements needed for Cisco UCS Director to run properly. So from here, we have to go to administration and guided setup. We can do that, but instead we already have the guided setup open up in terms of the wizard, so I'm gonna go with that. So I've just cancelled the wizard, and I've realized that that was not mentioned in the guide, so I'm just going to follow whatever it is in the guide. So from the top UCS Director menu, I'm going to get to the guided setup. So it's in administration and then the guided setup, and now we can see a very familiar window as compared to this guide here, and the guide tells us to go through the initial system configuration panel here. and then click all of that, and then we will have to jump right at it where we have to configure the DNS server. So let's do that. Start with initial system configuration. Or instead, we can launch the guided setup, because that's just going to walk us through step by step through all these procedures. We could have done that from the wizard, but I just canceled that to show you exactly how it is mentioned in the guide. And as per the guide, we will check everything. These are the bare minimum configurations required in order for Cisco UCS directory to work properly. So let's submit that. And everything's done, and let's see if we can go back a little and see the DNS summary, because instead of a new session I pretty much went with the previous summary, the previous session, and apparently it was all pretty much configured, and I should have skipped that part, but instead let's close it for now, and I'm gonna go through the initial system configuration once again in order to provide everything from scratch. So let's start a new session and click next, and I gotta, in terms of overview window, script through the licensing window, as license has already been updated, so let's skip that, and that's fine. In terms of DNS server, it's already been configured, so I'm gonna leave that as well. Let's see what we have to do with the mail server. In the mail server window, we've got to enter the following parameters. So my SMTP server would be 198.18.133 198.18.133.2, I believe. Yep, port is 25, demo user at dcloud.cisco.com, demo user, system IP address, that's 198.133.118, I believe, 112, and then username is administrator, and password is the same password that we use for all Cisco machines. And they've also got a test email address and a test mail. Nah, I don't think we need that. Let's click next, and in the email address, no changes are necessary, and I'm going to leave it as it is. So I'm gonna leave this as it. And in terms of NTP server, I'm not going to make any changes as well. So the next to that, and summary looks fine, and click next, and let's see what we have in terms of recommended next steps. So the guide tells us in the recommended next steps, you have to launch the button under Flexport Wizard, let's do that. Click next through the overview and click to add a new pod and then to add a new site, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're in the flex pod configuration. Click next. And in terms of pod, let's create a new pod. dCloud Data Center as the name. So I'm going to name it as dCloud Data Center. And what was next? And gotta add a new site and rename name it as dCloud site. So that's a new site, and name it as dcloud-site. Contact name, enter administrator. Submit that. Brilliant. And now we should have our site in there, dCloud site. And in the type, enter RTP in the address field. Click OK, because they apparently the whole lab is located at RTP, and that's why they want us to write RTP in the address field there, because they want the lab to reside in RTP. That's cool. Clicking adding will add the pod. And like that pretty much summarizes the first step, and let's jump to the next step. And then we've got to add, and then okay, add pod Linux box, and then select dCloud Data Center from pod drop down. Apparently we already have that. And next we proceed to UCS manager configuration, and we've got to provide a couple of things there. Demo underscore UCSM will be the name, and 192.18.133 192.18.133 and 90 in the admin, and same password there. Leave the port to be the same, and then click next to proceed to NetApp window. Well, it really slowed down. For some reason, it really slowed down my machine. It's not just the remote desktop on the client, but my physical machine is slowed down suddenly. I don't know what's happening there. We got an error, failed to establish connection with 192.1.8. I've got to double check the IP. And oh, sorry, that's 198. It should be able to detect it. Alright, brilliant, that's done. And from then onwards, we've got to select the NetApp cluster data. Let's do that. And NetApp underscore edge as the name. NetApp underscore edge. And and 198.18.133 115 user ID is root, password it's the same password there, so let's see, let's go 12345 there, and that's pretty much it. Click next. Now we are at an access physical devices level. Device IP 198.18.40. 198.18.133.40 and admin and root. No, sorry, that's admin and Cisco 12345 SSH. Import should be 22. Click next to configure the VMware pod. Okay, I've got this Nexus Physical HA account, but I'm kind of not sure what to do with it. So I'm going to skip that. No HA configuration, and click next to the virtual device. And in terms of enter the VM account parameters. I believe I kind of missed something. So that's a Nexus physical device. Click next to proceed to Nexus physical device. Click skip to proceed to Nexus virtual device configuration. So that's the Nexus physical device. So I'm not going to configure that, and gotta skip it. And for Nexus virtual device, that's the configuration we have to have for the virtual device. So that's just one part I skipped there. 18.133.40 I believe. Yep. And should configure admin. And then I gotta click to proceed the VMware. Okay, it's not letting me configure that because it tells me that IP address is already used in the data center. So let's double check that. 133.40. And in terms of cloud, dCloud dash cluster. dCloud slash administrator. And same password slash SDK. Next, we should have summary ready. There is a problem with our virtual device, and And I believe it's because I configured the physical device with the same IP address. Maybe that's the reason why it's not letting me configure. So and then we've got to finish that and click next to set the configuration, click close. Device discovery and the creation visit are outside the scope of this lab, so that's fine. We just have to configure the cloud director and a basic pod and close. Click finish to confirm, verify the flex pod, click converge on top, and then dCloud data center, verify that all components are present. So convert from the top and dCloud side, and then if we click dCloud data center, it should expand. So now we've got a VMware dCloud cluster, we've got a compute machine UCSM, we've got a VSM network, and we've got NetApp edge storage device there as well. So everything appears to be in place and pretty much looking just fine. Scenario number 3, it's got to create policies for these VMs, and we've got these 4 components that Cisco UCS directory is currently looking at: compute, storage, network, and system. So we've got to create policies that pretty much defines the rules of each of these components in order for Cisco UCS directory to automate and orchestrate the whole data center fabric properly. So to do that, we have to go to Cisco UCS structure menu and then policies. So let's jump to that. Policies, and then we have to go to virtual hypervisor policies and network policies. So policies there. So hypervisor policies, and let's jump to network policies first. And once we're there on the VMware Network Policy tab, we've got to click to add a new policy. So we are on VMware Network Policy, and then we've got to click add to add a new policy and enter sales network policy. And click plus to add a VM network. So let's do that. In the add entry, we've got to add Ethernet 0 in the NIC alias field. And select E1000 from adapter type. And click plus to add a port group, and click select to select the port group, and then select demo VLAN and click select. So that's the one we need. And this particular guy's got VLAN ID 716 promiscuous port disabled, and it's a distributed virtual port group. And we leave everything just like that. Click submit, and that should summarize the first VMware network policy. And then verify, and then we've got to submit, and then we've got to verify that the policy appears right over here, and we've got it. Okie doke. And from the main policy, we've got to go to storage. It pretty much will keep doing the same steps over and over again once we are done with all of them. So let's define storage. And in the add storage, called sales bronze storage policy. So add new. No, we have to get to VMware storage policy. My bad. Let's go to VMware storage policy. Yep, and add new. And then I'm going to call it a sales bronze storage policy. Cloud name should be dCloud cluster. And storage profile, uncheck use local storage. Use local storage stats. Uncheck. Click next and submit, and we should see the policy. There we have it. And got to do the same with the compute policy. Go to virtual hypervisor and compute, and we should be in VMware computing policy, and then we've got to click the plus sign to add a new one. Add computing policy. Sales bronze compute policy. Cloud name should be dCloud cluster, and we've got to leave everything just like that, and it will create the compute policy. Right, brilliant. There we have it. And the next step is to create a system policy. So you've got to go to policies and service delivery over here. And then we've got to click the plus sign to add a new policy, system-wide policy, and we're going to name it sales system policy. I believe we've got to leave everything just like that, and 33.1 dclouds.cisco.com. And dcloud.cisco.com. And we just have to provide the IP address for this machine there. And that's 198.108.133. Let's double check that. .1 Windows and Linux. And enter administrator and the same password there. And that was 198.108.133.1. And as per the guide, let's fill that up with the company name and organization. So license owner type is dCloud and organization name is Cisco. That's pretty much it. Cisco Systems, whatever. And click submit and it should work. And then we have to add a cost model. It's the last step, I believe. We go to policy, virtual hypervisor policies, and no. You have to go to policies and service delivery and then click cost model. So we are in service delivery, and let's go to the cost model tab, add a new cost model, and gonna name it sales bronze cost model. And 2 here and 0.5 here. One-time cost is 2, and active VM cost is 0.5. And I am not sure how this cost model works, but right now I'm just following the guide and configuring, and I'll get back to that bit. I mean, later on, once we're doing the in-depth analysis of the whole configuration guide, and we're covering all the nomenclature and the technology behind the UCS director. So that's that. Click add. And now we have to create the self-service policy. And we've got to scroll to end user self-service policy. And then we've got to add a policy, VMware from account type, and yep. That's VMware. Submit that. And use the self-service policy. click the VM Power Management checkbox, and then click OK. And then we go to edit the virtual data center, and the purpose is to create a virtual data center. And apparently we've set up everything required for the virtual data center, and what a VDC does is just groups the elements logically and then assigns different policies to manage specific group requirements. In order to do that, we have to get to the policies, virtual hypervisors, and virtual data centers, the one of the only options remaining. So that's virtual data center there. On the VDC tab, we've got to click plus to add new. Then we have to provide the name. We have to select VMware from account type and click submit. Gotta add another group, and you gotta name it a sales group and provide an email, salesgroup at dcloud@cisco.com. Click add, and from there onwards we've got to select the approvers and contacts. So we've got to select this, a first level approver. Select admin and then click select for this one, and in the group I believe we had to select the group we just created, sales group. Cloud name is a cloud name. And then in terms of policies, we have to drop down. Sales system policy, dCloud default storage policy, cost model should be sales bronze cost model. And end user self-service that we recently created, so that's that. And then we have to click add to add a virtual data center, and then we have to verify that it's already there. So that's that, and that brings us to scenario number 4, where we have to configure user account and create a catalog in order to run this virtual data center properly. So for that, we have to go to Cisco UCS structure menu, administration, and then point out to users and groups. Click to add a new user and select service end user from the user role drop down. So we are in the user groups. We have to jump to users tab, and we have to click add, and then we have to select service end user from the role drop down. Service end user, but select sales group from user group down. And now we have to provide the login name, demo user, and the same password. Confirm that. And UCS the external. UCS the external at dcloud.cisco.com. Enter demo in the first name and user in the last name, and that would pretty much add the demo user. And click add, and okay to create the user account. And then we have to create a catalog. We have to go to policies and then catalog. So if we jump to policies tab and then catalogs tab, we have to add a new catalog, and it should be of standard type. On Ubuntu 12 server and catalog name. And we have Linux and catalog icon drop down. We have Linux. And we have to select the groups and select the sales group that we already configured. It should be in dCloud cluster. Next to image, select the Ubuntu 12 SRV from the list. That should provide the image for the VM Linux there. Ubuntu 12 SRV. Click next to application details and user credentials, and we are pretty much done dividing the catalog here. And it specifically tells us not to make any changes over here, so we will just keep clicking next and pretty much add the basic catalog without changing anything. And once we're done, we submit to create a catalog, and it should appear in the default catalogs section here. Then we have to configure an email client. So from the demonstration workstation, open the script folder and double click UCS structure email setup. So that's the workstation, and we'll have to jump to the desktop, scripts, and Cisco UCS structure email setup. Got to open that. console will open in the external email address pop-up. Enter the email address you want emails related to the demo sent. So I'm going to put my personal email address there, just to see what I get. Oh, let's switch to the one that I only use for updates. And no confirmation, nothing's happening here. And then we have to use the self-service provisioning. Open Internet Explorer browser window, click continue to this website, and log into UCS Director. So not Chrome this time. Continue, and then we have to log in using the demo user. And basically what we're doing is we have created a standard catalog, and we have enabled the demo user to deploy the standard catalog that we created, and it's just going to deploy the Ubuntu 12 server. And that's what the guide tells us to do, to open the standard catalog and see if the Ubuntu 12 server, dCloud server, is there, and deploy the workflow. Double clicking the create the workflow icon, and in the create service request dialog box, perform the following: catalog section deployment without making changes. We don't have to make any changes till the end. So we'll leave everything as it is, and we're not going to make any changes because all of it is previously being configured in the standard deployment. And won't let us go because that's an error in a VDC, and no. So apparently we've got some error in the script, and I believe it pretty much followed absolutely the same steps. But let's see if we skip something here. So go to converge. I've got data center working, so no problems there. And I've got my data center, no need configuration. So that's the problem. Sort out. And it turned out that for some reason the VM did not start itself. So I turned on the UCS Director VM manually, and then it let me move to the next stage of the workflow and change nothing and do nothing, and then submit that to deploy the workflow. and then we have to click services and double click the request list. And we have that request list here, and the admin must approve the service request. So I'm going to skip that one, Cisco AnyConnect, because I'm just connected directly using the remote desktop from the workstation. So I'm going to log in to Cisco UCS Director, and then I'm gonna log in with admin and password to approve it. Service approval page. So let's see if I can find the service approval page.
Number 3. In the back? Okay, so we can you tell me that what is the meaning of overshooting and how can we help with it?
Overshooting is the result that is above the steady state.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can calculate from the peak, difference between the peak and the steady state value divided by the value given.
Why overshooting is going to be actually why overshooting happen? What is the reason?
Because we want the value to become to its set point, so it will fluctuate because
Yeah, I know why it's saturated. What happening that is this saturation is happening. What do you think? It depends on what? You don't know? Okay, you? No? What's your idea? Yes. Yes, one question. Okay. Now you, not you, all of you, what's your idea? Why overshooting happen actually? This is because of what? Why there? How can we increase or decrease the error?
apparently I found out that the image was not properly copied to the design directory. It was supposed to be in the opt directory, and I accidentally copied it to the root, and apparently that's the reason why I wasn't able to run the script. So I'm gonna try it once again, and I hope that this time we'll be able to extract the image. And it was on open. I previously copied the name. I'm gonna paste that, and it was ESXi-6. I will run this time. And for some reason it's not doing anything at all, but the guide says if you done copying the files, you should then return to WinSCP and then try to locate the folder of CNSA root templates where you should have an ESXi6 template ready. So once that's done, yep, it's doing something. So let's return to WinSCP, and the host name was, if I'm not wrong, 18.133.111 through Cisco 12345. If you log in,
Đây là có việc làm từ đó này, còn thêm thì xanh cái gì là click này, nhưng tôi वो भी सही कर देती है, तो फिर क्या होता है,
so now we can see that the bare metal has pretty much been done. The image has been mounted. Image has been previously copied to that virtual machine, is now mounted using the script, and we provisioned that using the bare metal server. And if we look at it back again on the Cisco UCS director, we can see that we have now image catalog of CentOS 6.0, and it's then telling us that we have to go to physical accounts and bare metal agents to see the list of available OSs there. So we have to go to physical, we have to go to physical accounts bare metal page and click the USCDH and click view details, and in the OS section we have a bunch of operating systems available. These are all the images that we just copied and mounted there. From the top, select physical compute and Pixie boot request tabs. So let's go to physical compute and go to Pixie compute tabs. and there we have to add a Pixie request. So let's try to add a Pixie request there. In goodness sake, there's tons of information that we have to provide it. The first field requires the MAC address of the server, so that's where we're going to get the MAC address. Return to vSphere, right click and click edit settings, and from there we're gonna get the MAC address. So let's jump in to VM where vSphere client vsex and edit settings, and from the NIC card we're gonna get the MAC address. So there's the NIC card, Pixie LAN, and that's the MAC address. So we copy that, jump back to UCS director in the Chrome window, and that's the server MAC address. So paste that, ESXi4, and then Cisco password, host name. And then we have to enter 0 and management VLAN, and that's 134 here. .198.18.133.134 with the network mask of 255.255.192.0. Let's double check that. And the gateway is 198.18.1. 198.18.1. Was that 1? 128.1. 128.1. And name server 133.1. Time zone, I'm not going to change that. So select UCD from target BMA and OS type, and I'm not going to change that. Target BMA. Whoa, that's UCSD BMA there. OS type is ESXi6 that we want. And in terms of submit to create the Pixie request, and then set a Pixie environment so that the request could get executed. We click that and we click set a Pixie environment and we click submit. We then have to enable VMRC and load ESXi installer. In order to do that, we have to go to virtual and compute, and then to VMs tab. So let's get to virtual, compute, then get to VMs, and from there onwards, so we have to select ESX4 and we then have to enable VMRC console on that. So we're gonna enable that. It powers, the state is powered off, but that's okay. Just gonna power it on, and Yeah, it's up and running. And then we had to do something with it. God, what was that again? And we had to enable VMRC console. Then let's launch the console. And apparently it's gonna launch the ESXi installer in the console. It's gonna carry on with the installation. The guide tells that it's gonna take 10 to 15 minutes, so I'm gonna pause the video recording here. The installation is still going on, and it's gonna take a while. The console is done running the PostScripts, but it's not giving me anything yet. So I'm gonna proceed with the next scenario, and let's see if I manage to get it working in parallel. So the next one is quite important. It's called application container deployment. This is the part where we actually start doing the orchestration using the Cisco UCS reactor. So we have to get to policies and orchestration for that. So that's the Cisco UCS reactor admin view. I have to go to policies, orchestration, and as it boots up, we have to expand the default, and then containers, and then advanced computer setup, and we have to clone that dCloud fence container. If we click on clone, then we have to provide the workflow name, and we gotta provide the name dCloud fenced container. Workflow context is, I think, any, and enter dCloud in the folder name. Let's give that a folder name, and other notifications, send email to group and admin. Then click next, add user input screens. No changes necessary. Submit that, and then we have to verify that it appears in the default container. And okay, so it's pretty much expanded everything. So I'm gonna turn this VMware off, and I'm gonna turn the Cloud Genie off, VDIs off. I'm only gonna look at containers, and I don't think I can find the one I just created. Okay. Oh, so it appended the dCloud container to the end of it. Well, that's cool. Now I've got my dCloud. And double click the workflow and double click allocate container source to edit this task. So let's see where it takes us. Apparently it's gonna take us to workflow designer, but we're gonna follow all the information and the resources given in the guide. So apparently now we're in the workflow designer, and then we have to allocate the resources to it. And in the edit task dialog box next to task information and user input mapping, in the task input string, perform the following steps. So we have to go to and then in user input mapping, distributed virtual port group N1K. Okay, and now we have to deploy an application container. For that, we'll go to policy and application containers, and from there we will click on virtual infrastructure policies tab and then add a new policy. And I'm gonna give it the name of sales 3-tier app. And the container type then we have to click the application container template, and we gotta add a new template, and we're gonna call that a sales 3 tier template as well. And in the networks we have to add a network, so leave that. And we have to provide the following if I zoom that a little bit, so that's L3 VLAN 2 and then VLAN. Inline 717 and 198.18.2.0 with the mask of 24, 18.2.1 as the default gateway. Alright, that's 18.2.1 and then submit. Click next. And in terms of virtual machines, we have to add a virtual machine, so let's do that. And we have to provide the following parameters for the virtual machine, I guess. Let's add the first one. It's called db server. VM image is db server. VM network interface add and then Ethernet 0. And then we have to add L3 VLAN to E1000 adapter type. And then I have to give IP 192.198.18.2.10, 198.18.2.10. Let's confirm that and submit. And that's the first VM. And we have to add another VM called app-server. And select the image. App server. Add the network with the password 220. Add the network, Ethernet 0 and 198.18, I guess .2.20. Let's confirm 18.2.20. So that's that, and then click submit, and the VM app server is done. Then we're gonna add the third one called the web server. Let's call that web server. Should have an image here. There we have it. Not going to use that. Interface would be Ethernet 0. And we'll have the password 192.18.2.30. 30. Brilliant. And that's gonna add another one to it. Submit, intercept that. Wicked. And now we're gonna proceed. We'll have 3 VMs, and then in the policies we'll use all the sales bronze policies and network policies that we previously defined. So click next and look for the policies, and we've got sales, we've got storage, and we also had a system policy, and we also had a cost model. So everything that we define ourselves, and end user self-service and VNC based console access. Hit next and container setup, and in the workflows windows we've got to click select and type dCloud just like that, and select, and let's look up for dCloud and select that, and pretty much review and submit. Now we gotta add it to the catalog, so once again we'll have to go to policies and catalog. After another container, click add, and then we have to add service container and catalog type. And we've got to enter sales underscore 3TO app. And sales group. Now we got service. Double click the container to see the workflow, which can be deployed by the user, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Like we deployed the. Okay, so that's that. That's in practice, and then we're gonna jump back into Internet Explorer, and then we're gonna jump back to catalogs. And I hope when it gets refreshed, you got service container there. So double click the service container, and then again request that. And it's gonna create a request for the service container workflow to be executed, and one of the admin users got to approve that. So that's done. Monitor the request, click services, in the top UCS directory menu, so I'm gonna jump back to my Chrome, and then we'll have to look for the services. So I'm not actually getting a tab where I can monitor my services. So apparently I'm just going through the tabs to find out where we have services. It says click services in the top UCS directory menu. So if I jump back here, click services, I'll have service available in there, and it's in progress. And it says to view the detail, provision container, and it's provisioning. And if you jump back to VMware, we'll find out that it's actually cloning virtual machine called DB server. It's 58% done. It created a folder called dCloud created a folder called fence containers, and it's just going to step by step copy all the virtual machines. So first it's done with DB server, and then it's going to do app server, and then the web server. And once all of that is done, if you refresh that, the workflow will continue step by step. So right now it's provisioning the containers for VMs, and then it's going to resync, and then it's going to go all the way through. And I'm going to pause the video recording for now because it's going to take a while. And as you can see, it has cloned, pretty much copied the app server virtual machine. So the DB server is up and running. App server just got copied and is at the moment powering on the app server on virtual machine. And as you can see, it's powered on, and now it's gonna copy the last one, web server virtual machine. And once it's done copying and it powers it on, we're gonna actually test it using a web server. By the time it gets copied, I'm gonna talk about the next portion that I'm gonna be doing in next 20 minutes, and that's going to be the scenario number 7, creating and deploying a VLAN using Orchestrator. And that's the last important thing that we're gonna look at. And for this particular part, I'm gonna skip scenario number 8, which is applying a patch. So once my VLAN, my VM for the web server is up and running, I'm gonna double check it by pointing out my browser to webserver.dcloud.cisco.com. and once that's done, and if I get anything that gives me indication that my app server, DB server, and web server is up and running, then I'm going to carry on with scenario 7. Okay, now we can see the web server virtual machine is up and running, and if we point our browser to the demo web server, we should get some response, and that should confirm that yeah, all the 3 tier virtual machines are up and running. and that includes the app server, the web server, and the DB server. No, we're not getting anything from the web server. Let's double check. So doesn't looks like there's any trouble with it. Let's try it. Let's try to reload that once again. Still taking a while, but getting nowhere. I'm gonna get back to it later because and we just have to make sure that there's just only one VLAN, which is called the VLAN default. And let's jump to LAN. And if you look at the VLANs, there's only one VLAN default. And now we're gonna set up using set up another VLAN using the orchestrator. And for that we will go to UCS directory, go to policies and orchestration. So we're in policies and then orchestration, and we will be adding a new workflow. So add a workflow and add VLAN to UCS and workflow name. So in workflow, click another workflow. And we gotta use dCloud. And we click next in user inputs. I guess we had to select the notification part as well. So I'm gonna notify admin and groups. And then we have to add a user input, so we gotta give input label VLAN ID. And then in input type, we will select VLAN ID for sure. And then we will also select VLAN name and generic text input. I'm gonna click OK next and then submit that. And in the available task list, expand physical compute tasks and then Cisco UCS, and we've got to add the VLAN there. And then we have to execute, providing the VLAN ID, VLAN name. And if we execute now, it will ask us for VLAN IDs and VLAN names. So I'm gonna put VLAN ID 10 and VLAN name is Cisco UCSD and click submit. And it successfully created a service request, initiated, and it's gonna add a VLAN, and then it's completed successfully. And now we're gonna return to UCSM and see if we've got another VLAN, and there you have it. We already have that VLAN UCSD having VLAN ID 10. So what next? This is pretty much the end of scenario 7, and I'm gonna leave this scenario 8 for now, and that pretty much concludes the basic installation and configuration of Cisco UCS Director.